All right, welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show. Guys, I want to share with you real quickly Wealth Protection Research, one of our sponsors here. At the very heart of our democracy lies a principle that we all hold sacred, and that is free speech. It's the cornerstone that supports every freedom that we cherish. Yet in today's digital age, discussions about our wealth, our rights, and our future are being silenced or overshadowed in mainstream narratives, leaving many feeling voiceless in conversations that are crucial to our financial independence and security. This is where Wealth Protection Research steps in. They're armed with a mission that's never been more critical. Wealth Protection Research is not a financial advisory firm. They are defenders of free speech, committed to giving a voice to the silent. Wealth Protection Research tirelessly seeks out financial experts. These are the voices that challenge prevailing narratives, especially as we navigate the uncertainties of the 2024 election. Wealth Protection Research has created a 2024 Election Wealth Protection Report. This free report highlights the 3 best ideas for protecting and growing your money heading into the 2024 election. It contains ideas the mainstream media won't touch, and listeners can get it completely free. All you have to do is text the word IDEAS, IDEAS, to 76626 to claim your free copy. If you believe in the sanctity of free speech and the importance of financial freedom, act now. Text the word IDEAS, IDEAS, to 76626 to claim your free copy of this 2024 Election Protection Report. It's time to widen the scope of what we're told, to hear the ideas the establishment does not think you can handle, and to take control of our financial destinies. Again, text the word IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy. And now I am joined by my guest, Josh Hammer. He is the senior editor at large at Newsweek. You can find him online. You can also find him on X. But I wanted to bring Josh on to talk about 2 things. Obviously, the college chaos that we're seeing on these campuses, it's honestly anti-Jewish. I really feel like these people are completely complicit. I feel like they're terrorists. Those are my feelings. But anyway, we have Josh on to speak about that. Also, I want to get his take. I saw an article or read an article. It's been probably a few weeks of what Trump needs to do in order to win. I want to talk to him about both of those things. So, Josh Hammer, welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Appreciate you joining us, man.
Carl, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Listen, Josh, I got to get your take just on a personal level. I mean, you're Jewish. When you see what's happening on the college campuses, when you see that the Democrat Party is willingly throwing Jewish Americans under the bus in order to get votes, I guess, in Michigan, just seriously on a personal level, I'd like to know how that feels, because I got to be honest with you, Josh, being a black man in America, I don't feel like I experience racism. I'm being completely honest with you. And now that my Jewish brothers and sisters actually are, I'd like to know how you feel.
Look, I mean, I'm kind of struggling to that's a very powerful way to phrase the question, I guess is what I'm trying to say, Carl. And it's unfathomable. I mean, it is unfathomable stuff. I feel like a lot of Jews of my generation, millennial, Gen Z Jews, I'm 35 years old, we grew up in retrospect of something that was a bit of a bubble. It's possible that in the post-war era, called the 1950s onward, it's possible and in fact probable in retrospect, there was probably about a half century of a golden age of American Jewish life, where I think the West, Europe, and even America, I think, had this lingering guilt over what had happened in World War II with the genocide of the Holocaust. And during this golden age, which I grew up in, I was born in 1989, American Jews had it really good in this country. I mean, all American Jews really needed to thrive was meritocracy, give them a fair shot at all the elite institutions, and they're disproportionately going to get in them oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes. But the tide obviously has severely turned, and the stuff that we are seeing on campus now, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, this is not anti-Zionism. I mean, we're not debating here whether or not a 2-state solution is proper, whether or not the tactics in Rafah or Khan Yunis are proper here. We're literally hearing, go back to Poland, you dirty Jew. At Columbia University, we literally saw this 39-year-old professional agitator of sorts who was there. He was locked into the Hamilton Hall building that the NYPD thankfully was able to evacuate. They took a hostage in there, for God's sake, a janitor who was in there inadvertently. And this 39-year-old professional agitator, my friend John Hassan, actually pulled up a tweet of his from a day or two after October 7th. This guy was literally retweeting the Hamas spokesperson, there kind of with the whole outfit. It's unfathomable stuff, Carl. And it makes me sad. I mean, I guess the one word that I have to really react to your question of point blank range is it just makes me really sad that this is the current state of America right now. This is the current state of what 50 years of leftist indoctrination in K through 12 and higher ed has done. This is the result of large scale immigration, frankly, importing a lot of people who just do not share the Judeo-Christian worldview on a very basic level. And it's just a toxic brew of factors, but there's no denying where we are right now.
Yeah, let me, because you just went there, so let me go there real quick. I have to ask: is this a prelude to something worse? Is this a distraction? The Biden administration apparently, despite what we're seeing on these college campuses, where it's just openly anti-Jew hatred, now they want to bring more immigrants in from the Middle East. I mean, this is. I honestly, I feel like I'm being punked. Do you remember that old show on MTV? I literally feel like I'm being punked, where day to day sometimes, Josh, I don't even know how to react to this stuff.
It's worth emphasizing another point as well here, Carl. So I'm actually working on a book right now. I'm drafting a book about the Jews in the West. It's kind of a post-October 7th book. God willing, it'll be on bookshelves less than a year from now, or early 2025 at the latest. But as part of this book process, I actually reread the Hamas charter. This is their charter from 1987. And I want to make one point here. Yes, they call for the genocide of the Jews, as not just Hamas, but ISIS, Al-Qaeda, all these radical Islamist groups do. In the Hamas charter, they also call for the death of Christians. And that is why in places like Dearborn, Michigan, you hear chants like "Death to America." That is why in nearby Ann Arbor, Michigan, at the University of Michigan, there was a pamphlet that went out from a group of pamphleteers last week that said "Freedom for Palestine means death to America." They literally put that in writing. I mean, for the whole world to see. We just saw at UNC Chapel Hill earlier this week, this whole standoff between the fraternity brothers who are protecting Old Glory, the American flag, and those who are pelting rocks and water bottles at the chancellor of the university for trying to restore it after they tore it down. So really what's going on here, Carl, it is about the Jews, but it's also really not about the Jews. I mean, this really is a battle for Western civilization. And on the one hand, I kind of hate to paint it in such stark terms because people think that I'm just rambling or I'm speaking hyperbolically, but I'm actually really not. I'm really, really not here. This is the chickens coming home to roost of 50, 60 years of civilizational self-hatred that has been pedagogically indoctrinated into the lifeblood and the bloodstreams of impressionable and vulnerable young Americans across multiple generations. That is what is happening right now. The Jews and the Jewish state of Israel are just the canary in the coal mine, as historically the Jews have often been. But this is ultimately so much broader than that.
Josh, listen, I totally agree with you. And I actually spoke to this. I was in for Dennis Prager, I think just a few days ago, sitting in for him on his radio show. And I said just as much. I mean, it's obvious. Listen, we all know those that are, religiously inclined and pay attention to this stuff, that Israel is the little Satan, America is the great Satan. And there's no doubt that these Islamists, they want to bring all of us down. And I really feel like the leftists are playing into their hands, to be frank with you, Josh. I think these ignoramuses on these college campuses, these Ivy League schools, supposed to be the smartest or the brightest of the bright. And I think they're totally being duped by Hamas and these people that want to bring Western civilization down, and they're doing it under the guise, at least these lefties are, these little commies. They think it's virtuous. It seems to me they really believe that they're standing for something by hating on Jewish people when the intent is to destroy all of us.
I was just on, before you and I spoke, Carl, I was just on my buddy Seth Leibson's radio show in Phoenix, Arizona. Seth Seth is a great guy. And Seth kind of laid out his theory to me, and we discussed it on the air. So Seth has this taxonomy where there are three separate categories of people that are participating in these so-called protests. On the one hand, you have the ideological true believers. On the other hand, bucket two, you have folks who are just naive and easily duped, frankly. And then bucket three is the ultra privileged, those who grew up with just immense privilege, and they feel that they have no other way but to expiate their American guilt, their white guilt, whatever it may be, than to partake. And the lines are a little blurry. And admittedly, a lot of folks probably fall into numerous of these buckets, but I'll emphasize one point here, which is that you can't downplay the extent that raw naivete is going here. The indoctrination is really bad. We were just discussing that. At this point, you go across American university campuses, every time you see a Middle Eastern Studies department or a Near Eastern Studies department, unless it's at like Yeshiva University in New York, I mean, your antennae should go off and say this is going to be a hotbed of anti-Israel, anti-Zionism, anti-American, anti-Western sentiment. But the naivete is really, really playing a big part here, too. And I'll tell you why. It's because this starts so much earlier than the American university campuses. They're hearing this stuff at this point, K through 12. It was maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago or so, that someone in the Seattle, Washington area actually leaked to me a PowerPoint presentation from his or her, I can't remember, from like their high school history class about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I was thumbing through this 50, 60 slide deck, and like my eyes were bulging out, like, oh my God. I mean, these facts are wrong. This terminology is ridiculously misleading here. So they're getting it so far beyond campus. And that is why sometimes I hear my fellow conservatives talk about the need to save higher education. And I hear you, okay? I mean, we can't just unilaterally disarm. We want to make inroads there in academia. But the fight starts so much earlier than that. It really is partially a K through 12 phenomenon.
You know, it's so funny because literally that's one of my questions to you here, Josh. And again, I'm speaking to Josh Hammer. He's a senior editor at large for Newsweek.com. Also, where do people real quickly here, Josh, we only have a minute left in this block. Where can they find you on X or anywhere that you are on social media?
Yeah, so I'm on X at Josh_Hammer, Instagram, Josh B. Hammer. And I read a weekly syndicated column that goes up in Newsweek and a bunch of other Right of Center publications, including SalemZoneTownHall.com. And I host my own show, The Josh Hammer Show, as well.
All right. So just 30 seconds left in this block. I'm not sure that these Ivy League schools are worth saving. One of the things that I posted on X here, Josh, is I really don't care. I don't give a flip if these people burn their schools down. Quite frankly, I think conservatives need to start building their own. I only wish that the New York Police Department would have the permission to use a leather belt and spank some of their behinds, the spankings that they probably never got as children as they're running from the flames, Josh. 10 seconds, I'm sorry, and we'll come back with more Josh Hammer.
I agree with you. I mean, look, in my ideal world, these universities would cease to exist tomorrow.
We'll be back with more. All right, welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show. I am back with my guest, Josh Hammer, Newsweek senior editor at large. Before we were so rudely interrupted by the clock, I was talking about, Josh, tearing these schools down. I really don't give a flip if they burn down. I do understand that we need to, as conservatives, kind of take over these institutions slowly but surely. But I'm not of the opinion that these Ivy League schools could be salvaged. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong. I'm really just trying to kind of, play the hand the most soberly, if that's even a word, soberly I possibly can. So Carl, my approach to the problem of institutional capture, which has been a problem for a very long time, obviously Gramsci, the Italian Marxist theorist, spoke of this long march through the institutions. And my approach is basically an all of the above strategy. So, we definitely do need more new institutions. We frankly need more Hillsdale colleges. I mean, America would be a lot better place if we had more Hillsdale colleges. That's going to entail some billionaire or ultra-millionaire donors who are going to start building some universities, such as in our mutual state of Florida. I happen to notice there's a lot of land there in Central Florida that I think could be put to very good use by putting a Hillsdale College of the South right there. But anyway, I digress.
That's a good point.
But on the other hand, we shouldn't unilaterally forsake opportunities to make inroads where we can, for the very simple reason, Carl, that these universities, unfortunately, are probably, realistically speaking, going to retain some semblance of prestige and credibility for at least a little ways to come. Now, you're starting to see some movement on this. Some employers are getting out there and being like, wow, I am not hiring from Columbia University because you basically went to Hitler Youth Program when you go there. We need more of that. We should be encouraging that. We should be encouraging graduate schools, graduate programs, employers, anyone who has any skin in the game. Whether, I clerk for a federal judge, I'm a lawyer. Judges should not be hiring from these schools. All pressure should be on those to announce that they are not going to hire from these schools, and that'll put some pressure on the market. But realistically speaking, we're probably stuck with them for at least the near term. So for then, we should try and make some inroads the best we can.
Yeah, and I definitely see your point. I mean, there's no doubt about that. We do have to fight to make up some ground. It just, sometimes it just seems so overwhelming. But I realize that we cannot abandon the field. So I do appreciate that take. Is this a prelude of something worse to come? And I'm just speaking of. I'm speaking of in the near future. I'm not speaking of on a macro level, but are we watching a prelude to more BLM style riots and, like we had in the summer of 2020, more Antifa type riots? It seems to me that the left never want to talk about Biden's policies. And so this is a way of, as crazy as it sounds, even the left would use these anti-Jewish protests, if you will, on these college campuses in order to advance their agenda and distract us from more things.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely gearing up towards a 2020 summer redux. I mean, a summer of George Floyd redux. I mean, much has been written about the fact that the Democratic National Convention this year is in Chicago, the same place where it was back in 1968 when there were also mass protests and riots. And it seems to me that is exactly where we are headed right now. And part of the problem, to go back to the summer of 2020, is that those who perpetrated those riots and destroyed property and vandalized, no one was really held accountable, Carl. It's kind of like COVID. I mean, there was a total lack of accountability for those who suffered fairly grievous and egregious harms. Thankfully, there weren't a ton of people shot down or murdered or anything, but some people were injured, and there was a ton of property damage. And the fact that the BLM Antifa playbook worked so well in 2020. You're seeing the same people now out on the streets. I mean, ultimately, if I can kind of try to kind of armchair, psychology, what's actually going on here, Carl, these are people, these young people that have a fundamental void in their souls. And, I'm a traditional Jew. I think that you're a man of Christian faith as well here. So you and I are not familiar with this because we don't have that void. We have meaning in our lives here. But you're dealing with folks who are fundamentally nihilists at heart. And they're ever yearning for some cause that they can claim as their Selma, Alabama moment. So whether that was same-sex marriage a decade ago, whether it was BLM Antifa in 2020, whether it is Hamas and anti-Zionism, I guess now, they are ever on the march for some faux moralistic crusade that they can egregiously claim as their own moral grandstand. And I think that is what is happening right now. And again, because the 2020 BLM Antifa playbook was actually very successful, I really have no reason for thinking that they're not going to try to repeat it again in an election year just like it was last time.
And I think that's a great point. If I could circle back to that, actually, my wife says this: everyone needs to worship something or someone. And so if you're not Christian, if you're not you're Jewish, if you're not a person of faith, you're going to find something to worship, whether that's climate change, whether that's Hamas. I never thought I'd be saying that. But I mean, it seems like really that's where we are. And it's weird because these people are just lacking a fundamental understanding, in my opinion, of God. And so their lives are meaningless. So they're just searching for money and, higher education, so on, et cetera. But their lives are completely empty because they feel as though they have no purpose. And so the left takes advantage of that. But I got to say, I feel like this is a great opportunity for the right, Josh, for Republicans to take advantage of, I'll be honest with you. This college situation. I hate talking about a story over and over and over and over again, but it's worth talking about it, especially when you see your fellow brethren that are being, attacked, if you will. But I also think this is a great opportunity, as morbid as that may sound, for Republicans to capitalize on this. And I want the world to see who the left is and what they are, and then offer them our ideas, Josh.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Carl. I mean, this is an election year. It's a very important presidential election. Obviously, a lot of very important non-presidential elections for control of the Senate, for the House, at the gubernatorial level. And this is the kind of environment where you want to try to paint with a very broad brush and to try to get bold contrast between the forces of civilizational sanity, as I call it, and the forces of civilizational arson on the other hand. And, I've been using that phraseology, civilizational sanity versus civilizational arson, for a while now. But, don't take it from me. I mean, like, literally look on your TV screen. Look at what is happening across the campuses right now. Look at what is, I fear, going to happen outside the DNC in Chicago this summer, where you have, again, the mayor, this far left communist sympathizer, Mayor Johnson, who is probably going to egg on the protest. I mean, this is going to get ugly. I hate to kind of just say it negatively, but it is. And you're totally right that does present an extraordinarily enticing opportunity for Republicans, for conservatives, to demonstrate a contrast. So I like the fact that you've had a lot of high-profile Republican senators, such as Tom Cotton and Josh Hawley, who for the past week and a half or so have been clamoring to send in the National Guard on college campuses. They are absolutely correct to analogize what is happening right now to Jewish students on campus to the Little Rock Nine that Governor Orville Faubus, the horrible segregationist, tried to prevent the integration of those schools at Little Rock back in 1957. President Eisenhower sent in the 101st Airborne Division. He was absolutely correct to do so. And I've been saying for a while that is what the situation now calls for on campuses. There's also a lot of other remedies to what's happening on campus. You can try to prosecute some folks for material support for terrorism. You can file some class action lawsuits about infringement of Title VI civil rights claims. So there's a lot of legal ways to go about this. But you have to start trying to take the rhetorical and moral high ground of just securing and enforcing civil rights, because that ultimately is actually what's getting infringed right now. People talk about free speech. You don't have a free speech right to tell me, go back to Poland, you dirty Jew. You don't have a free speech right to form a human chain to prevent someone from entering the library at UCLA because he's wearing a Magen David, a Star of David. Are you kidding me? This is not about free speech. This is about basic human decency and sanity versus the forces of evil. That really is fundamentally what's happening.
Yeah, honestly, I've heard that argument. I've heard that from some libertarians. And listen, I love my libertarian brothers and sisters, but I think of it in this way. It's why I've not or I never will be a libertarian, because you act as though you can have, I'll hear people say all the time, Josh, well, I'm a fiscal conservative, but I'm not a social conservative, and I hear a lot of libertarians say that. And all I have to do is look at my own community. All I have to do is look at the Black community and say, well, that doesn't work out well. Right. When you talk about fiscal conservatism, but you negate social conservatism, and then you have a bunch of people out of wedlock having sex and having babies or having abortions, it doesn't really work out well for society. So it's not that freeing like people would say. I just think it's a complete and utter fallacy. But I look at the opportunities. We have a minute left here, man. Josh, this time just goes too fast with you, man. I got so much stuff that I want to talk about. I want to go another segment with you, but I'll be respectful of your time. We got a minute left. All right, opportunities. Paying off student loan debt. I want conservatives talking about that. I look at these college campuses.
Right.
Someone should be saying there's no way we should be paying off anyone's student loans. And school choice. This is an excellent opportunity to frame school choice, Josh.
Education is a winning issue for conservatives, Carl. I mean, look at what Ron DeSantis has done in our state of Florida over the course of his gubernatorial tenure here. He has been absolutely crushing it. Probably his number one issue has been the education issue. The COVID stuff got a lot of headlines, properly so. But when you look at the school board races that he is winning, when you look at the curricula that he is changing here, expanding school choice, the Florida model when it comes to education policy really is the playbook nationally speaking. And look, there's no lower hanging fruit in America for working class voters than defund higher education. That's very much a winning message as well.
All right. Josh Hammer, Newsweek senior editor at large. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate you. God bless.
You bet, Carl.